What screams not going to last long for couples? Story 1. The way they speak to each other when they're not alone. I noticed this after my divorce and I started dating again because you speak to these new people with a lot of respect and kindness. Then we'd get around married couples and they'd say awful things to each other in nasty, snappy tones, and it was jarring. Fast forward 10 years and all those couples I noticed doing that are divorced now. Yeah, I have a friend who has been with her current BF for around 5 years. I never liked him. I don't know what it was, but I just can't stand the guy. I don't think I'd ever tell her that unless she breaks it off or is on the cusp of doing so, with the reason being that we all hang out in a group together with other friends and I don't want to make things awkward by being honest, and said friend is pretty sensitive. So I keep my mouth shut and act civil towards him, but don't make an effort to talk or interact any more than I need to. Not only do I just not like him on a personal level, but the way they interact with each other makes me dislike the relationship that much more. Whenever we have parties or get-togethers, the two of them bickering is to be expected at this point. It creates this uncomfortable tension that the rest of the group has to deal with and try to ignore, and it can really dampen the mood when we're all just trying to have a good time. I see them being flirty or acting like a normal couple every once in a while, but from my perspective, they fight with each other more than love on each other. I'm no matchmaker, but I just don't feel like they're a good match, and I wish they'd break up already. Unfortunately, I think that they are financially dependent on one another, and this makes breaking up a lot less convenient. So out of fear of losing the little stability they have, they just stay together. The worst thing about something like this is that everyone but them knows what's going on. Story 2. Walking on eggshells around your partner in terms of what you can and can't say. If you feel like you can't disagree with your partner and/or voice your opinion without it turning into an argument. This is what happened in my marriage. We were married and everything was great until she made decisions that I wasn't happy with, but every time I brought anything up, it was always, well, I don't this or I don't that. It was tiring and ultimately led to her cheating on me. This is why I think my mother and her spouse are going to break up soon. That guy can't take anyone's opinions but his own. And if you don't have said opinion, you're either dismissed or yelled at. She told me this was normal when I was still living with her. Can't think of a worse way to live. Story 3. If they have strongly conflicted plans for their future, either means they'll break up eventually, or one or both of them will end up in an unhappy compromise. Yep, do not get married if one of you wants kids and the other doesn't. It's a whole mess. I have an aunt and uncle who I love dearly. He wanted kids badly and she did not. They almost divorced over it, but eventually worked through it. Traveled the world, had beautiful properties, the whole 9 yards. Now she is in her 60s and every time she drinks, she talks about how she should have had kids. My uncle gets this look on his face that is difficult to describe, but it's not good. I dated a guy for about 2.5 years who wanted kids when I did not. I was willing to compromise, but he was 1000% set on I won't raise any kids that aren't mine because it's not the same. And I want like 5 kids. He ended up breaking up with me and I was devastated. He was the first guy I actually saw a future with at the time, but looking back now, 7 years-ish later, I'm so glad he did. I would hate myself if I were stuck in a relationship or marriage even with kids I didn't want. If you want a future together but you can't even agree on it, problems are bound to come up. Story 4. If one or both of the people are controlling over the other. When the dynamic is super obvious to outsiders early on, that's a bad sign. Whatever is happening on the outside is always worse on the inside. I know a couple where the woman will just berate her man publicly. She'll talk to him like he's an actual child. She tells him how much he's allowed to do certain things, but twists it so it doesn't look as bad. It's as if she genuinely thinks he's mentally disabled or something, except she only does it when she's being controlling. For example, she hates when he plays video games. She thinks it's immature and a waste of time that could be spent hanging out with her or being productive. She thinks it's embarrassing that he plays video games, so he has to sneak around to play video games at other people's houses so that he can play it off as it's the other person's fault that he was playing. Like, oh, Mike wanted to play and I just couldn't say no at his house. Now, I have seen this couple having a semi-private fight. They're very loud and literally go one room away from their guests to have fights. This woman will berate the way he talks during fights and literally mock him to his face in a baby voice like, "Nah, nah, nah, I'm a grown man and I still play video games," instead of actually making a real commentary on the argument. This breaks his spirit and he ends up just exhausting during the fight and succumbing to whatever she wants. And the things she wants are super inconsistent, so he can't win there either. The public thinks she doesn't like video games and looks down on him for it, but privately she's completely broken this guy's spirit and he can't escape the cycle due to the constant emotional exhaustion. And that's not even true privacy. That's when I'm in another room. God only knows how bad it is when they're completely alone together. I hear some of it because this guy has come to my house when she kicks him out for the night, and he vents to me while we play hours of video games, of course, lol. I've changed a few minor details for privacy because I wanted to give a thorough example. This is shockingly common. I know like 8 people who have at one point been in a relationship like this. Whatever abusive behavior is seen publicly is always worse behind closed doors. No doubt about it. Story 5. Where are you? Hanging out with my cousins? Really? Voice call me right now. After my ex and I broke up, she told me that she couldn't find a notebook of hers and that if I found it in my stuff to please throw it away. It was her personal thoughts and wasn't meant to be read by anybody else. I told her I wouldn't read it, and I meant it. I had no intention of violating her request. A year later, I was going through a box and found a notebook I didn't recognize and had long forgotten my pledge to my ex. I just thought, what's this? And opened it up. By the time I realized it was the notebook she asked about, I already had a gist of it. It wasn't a diary. She had been spying on me and journaling all her findings. A page would read like this: 4:55 p.m. says he has to work late. 6 p.m. his office light is on, so are Michelle's and Jennifer's, but Jennifer's car isn't there. 7:30 p.m. his car is still there, the office light is on, and Michelle's car is still in the parking lot. 12:30 p.m. his car is gone for lunch, and so is Tina's, neither at the parents' condo. She was good at it too. Never once did I catch her or even catch a glimpse of what I thought might be her car. Never did I come home unexpectedly and find her not home. Nothing. But she was regularly acting as a PI, thinking I was banging every girl I worked with. She could have just switched careers and actually made money out of it. Story 6. I was at a party one time and there was a marriage counselor there that had been working for 20-something years in couples counseling. I asked her what the number 1 sign was that the couple wasn't going to make it. Without hesitating, she said, if one person shows contempt for the other's feelings, it's over. This is a really well-documented one. Contempt is a dead giveaway. The moment you start sneering or using incredulous sarcasm, you should consider it to be a red alert. My wife and I are doing fine these days, but a few of our worst fights have contained contempt. And fortunately, because we've heard this guidance before, we realized we were in very dangerous territory and needed to take a really hard look at the root causes of what was pissing us off at each other. Anger can be a natural reaction, as long as it doesn't come with abuse. Contempt, however, is like black mold. My wife and I have been in that before and done those hard looks at the root causes, just a few times over our decade plus of marriage, and the key to getting through it, for us, is to remember they are your partner. Both parties should ultimately want to come through it for the better. It's not about being right or wrong. Most times when we have these hard talks, we both have realized that we've been unintentionally hurting the other in some fashion. But after talking about it, we can actually try to address those root causes and be mindful of them in our relationship going forward. It helped us both grow as individuals, and now that we've gone through the processes a few times, we're both more open to communicating the small things to each other before they become big things. And getting to that point is where the relationship starts to feel really solid and grounded, which is comforting in its own way too. If your partner can't even be honest about their feelings in front of you, what's the point? Story 7. When you start calculating how much you give and receive in a relationship. One of my exes did this. He saw our relationship as very transactional and literally kept score of each perceived slight, each dollar spent, and even wanted to keep the glassware he had prior to our relationship separated. As much as I want to be angry at myself for staying in that relationship as long as I did, I will just have to take it as a lesson learned. I've brought up to my wife that once she sits down to relax, she will ask me to do small things for her, like bring her something or do a chore. I will do them happily. I don't ask her to do things because I think it's rude to ask someone to do something just because I'm too lazy to get up. The issue is, when I don't feel like doing the thing, like 1 out of 50 tasks, she can't see why I'm being unreasonable and won't get up to get her a glass of water. I explain that I'm always doing things without complaint and reserve the right to be lazy sometimes. She claims it's not that hard to get a glass of water, so it isn't a big deal. She will do it herself at that point, but it doesn't look good on me because I have to draw a line in the sand over something small. I don't think I'm being unreasonable. I just think I'm being taken for granted a little bit. It doesn't spell disaster for us. I just need to remind her I'm doing things for her voluntarily. Note to self, in relationships, don't do the math. Story 8. If the relationship started with one of them cheating on their previous partner and then leaving them to be with this new person, I've witnessed 2 of these in real life and both of them ended with, surprise, more cheating. Like, I don't know why you'd possibly think starting a relationship with someone who you already know isn't faithful would be a good idea. Many years ago, 20 plus, my now ex-fiance cheated on me. About 6 months later, the woman he cheated on me with called me and asked if I thought he might cheat on her because he was acting suspicious. I said something along the lines of, well, yeah, remember how you met? How he was engaged to me when you two started dating? I know he must have said all kinds of awful things about me to justify it, but didn't you think even for a moment that he just might be a piece of shit? This was unfortunately my situation, the getting together part at least. It's too long to go into details, but I had a friend I had a crush on while with my long-term ex-boyfriend. I had strong feelings for him and I was in a complicated, unhealthy relationship with my ex. Alcoholism, drunk driving, manipulation, etc. And ended up kissing my friend behind my ex's back. I knew it was wrong and selfish and I broke up immediately. I am now dating my friend, and while this type of situation usually ends in chaos, we've been together a while now. I don't regret leaving my last relationship. It was over. I just regret the way I ended it because I really stooped so low as a person. I may not deserve the happiness, but I am very happy with my partner now. We had a lot of long discussions about the situation and our parts in it and our wrongdoings. We communicate much healthier than my ex and I did, and I don't hide anything. I don't have eyes for anyone else, and I am certain I have found my one. I do regret the way in which we ended up together, as I hate what I did, but all I can do is move forward and continue to shape up into a better partner. I plan to pursue therapy when I can afford it and get some health insurance again. These types of things probably don't work out for the most part, but mine is working, and I know in my heart and soul I'll never do such whack selfish shit again. That's just a bad situation waiting to happen. Story 9. Being attached at the hip or never allowing your SO to have alone time or hang out with other people without you. Had one friend whose girlfriend was like this to the extreme. They spent every day and waking moment together for the first 3 months of the relationship due to her always demanding to be with him or never allowing him any alone time. Usually it comes from a place of insecurity. They lasted 3.5 months and she went full rage crazy when they broke up. My BF was like that after we moved in together. Couldn't do anything alone because he'd be too lonely and guilt me about it. This included practicing guitar in the next room, going anywhere with anyone else, etc., except work though, of course. It wasn't just an insecure attachment style, there were other controlling elements in that situation too. Unfortunately, it took a couple of years living together for me to realize how bad it had become. Ever heard of personal space, anyone? Story 10. Moving in together after 2 weeks, saying I love you after 2 dates. Basically anything that happens way faster than it feels it should. My friend did this, met a girl and let her move in after a week. He wanted out of the relationship last year when she was threatening suicide if he spoke to me. He's not allowed friends other than her apparently. Unfortunately, he didn't break up with her. She then wanted to apologize to me, found the idea of that incredibly intense and checked herself into a psych ward. She came home after 4 months and suggested they try for a baby. She immediately got pregnant and the baby was born 2 weeks ago. It just seems to get worse and worse. This happened to me and her. It was a temporary move-in while she was waiting for her job to start in another nearby city, but we were cohabiting too early, and we both fell in love with each other too quickly. Things ended once she moved to her new job. I suspect she has borderline personality disorder, which is why she fell in love so quickly. I just found her to be absolutely amazing. Once she moved, she ended things because she didn't think things could work being 2 hours away. I suspect she broke things off because she was scared things wouldn't work and I would break up with her, so she did it to avoid being abandoned in my guess. Or she was just using me. Either way, it made me feel awful. So many things were working against us in that scenario. Had things gone normally, I think we would have made it. There is a too fast in real life too, guys. Story 11. When both make the atmosphere so uncomfortable when you are at their house. I remember my best friend's mom would complain about her husband to us when we were in high school. Perhaps unsurprisingly, they are now divorced. My best friend and her partner had dinner with a couple like this. She said it was so uncomfortable. The wife kept sniping at her husband as a joke and he just sat there and took it. They ended up drinking at my place after to basically get the ick of the evening off of them before going home. Nothing's worse than getting stuck in one of these houses. Story 12. breaking up every few minutes and then back together again. We have a friend who was in a relationship like that. We'd make plans for the weekend on a Monday and they'd have broken up permanently twice and made up by Friday, and then Saturday it was minute by minute on if we were actually going to do what we had planned. It was maddening. I managed to be in a relationship like this for 2.5 years. She would always break up with me and we'd get back together. I was too laid back for my own good. The last time was a wild ride. Buckle up, it's a long read. She'd gone back home for her grandfather's funeral, and I couldn't attend. I asked her what she needed, and she said she didn't know. I told her I'd be free whenever she needed to chat, or I could just take the initiative for her if she wasn't in the right headspace. She thanked me for being so understanding and said we could just do a phone call at the end of the night every day she was up there. Fast forward 4 months later, she tells me that she was breaking up with me because she met up with a childhood friend when she was back home, fell in love with him, and that he was going to be moving in with her. Turns out one of the instigating decisions was that he was there for her and I wasn't. When I told her we'd discussed what she wanted from me during that trip, she said she would have appreciated me calling or texting more often and that I should have known, i.e., I know we talked about this, but I didn't actually mean it, and you should have done the opposite of what I asked. I very calmly told her that this is the last time we were breaking up. Her response, never say never. I calmly respond with, no, this is never. Even if you say that you want to get back together before the end of this phone call, this is it. I am now at never. If you come back 3 months from now and tell me that this was a mistake, my answer will still be never. We were still friends when we'd broken up, so I asked her about the guy, when he was moving up, where he was going to stay, etc. Mostly numb, but incredibly relieved. She tells me he's moving into her room and they were splitting her quarter of the rent in half. I ask her if she's spoken to her housemates about this and she says not yet. I tell her that isn't a good idea to have someone move in without clarifying that first, because he would still be sharing the common spaces with them. She flips. She accuses me of holding her hostage in a relationship by threatening that we won't get back together if she breaks up with me again, and then says I'm a bad friend because I can't be happy for her. We keep talking, but we're talking less after that. 3 months later, during the holidays, she tells me her housemates are freaking out too, demanding they split the rent 5 ways. The other one doesn't feel comfortable with him staying there at all. They've also wizened her up to the fact that being nostalgic on top of an emotionally vulnerable time is not the best time to realize you're in love with someone over the course of a week. She tells me she wants me back. I stop for a second and say, I can't believe I actually got it down to the exact month. She talks about how stupid she is, how much she loves me, and says that she's going back home to break up with him to show me how serious she is about making our relationship work. I remind her about our conversation before it hits me. He was supposed to move in with her. She was going back home over the holidays and coming back with this man. He'd given up his apartment, packed up all of his things, and bought a plane ticket under the assumption that he's going back with her. She calls the conversation her penance for how stupid she was being, and I was like, your penance? What about him? Surprisingly, the needle that broke the camel's back in our friendship wasn't how she treated me. It was what she did to him. Adam, if you're out there, dude, you dodged a freaking bullet. Can people just decide if they want to be together? It's exhausting for everyone around them. Story 13. When he smashes her face in the cake at the wedding and she hates it. First one that came to mind. My cousin emptied out her bank account and her ex-husband's bank account and borrowed from their relatives to find a $25,000 wedding. They broke up a year later. They were together for over 10 years before this. They also posted pictures the morning after while in bed still. Another sign they're insecure about their relationship. Over-posting about how great it is all the time. My first husband asked me too, and I was like, dude, I'll be paying someone to put my makeup on and wearing the single most expensive garment either of us will ever own. Please do not be that guy and smear cake on me. He did it anyway. I filed for divorce before our 2nd anniversary. Cake is for eating, not for smearing. Story 14. Lack of communication. Discussing every disagreement means screaming over each other, shutting off communications, and/or running out of the room, so they won't be able to resolve anything in a constructive manner. Learning to communicate is probably one of the biggest tools my husband and I learned. The first few years together we would argue. Things would settle down, then about 8 to 12 months later, every little disagreement or argument we had, we'd bring up again and have a massive argument. Eventually we sat down and expressed that we wanted to stay together, but but we're tired of always having the same argument / things being brought up months later when they should have been fixed a while ago. We've now learned that 1. Whenever we feel like the other is getting mad at the other rather than focusing on the situation, we express it and we both know it's time for a little breather or time out. And 2, if we don't know or can't properly put into words how we're feeling or what specifically we're upset about regarding a situation, we'll tell each other, "I'm upset at this and I don't know why," or "I don't know how to properly say what I want, but this is the basis of it, so please don't listen to the words I'm using and try to understand what I'm saying or what I mean." And then the person actually listens and will repeat back what they think the other is saying. But getting to that point was a process, and there was a lot of "I need some space to cook off" in the middle of arguments. My partner, currently working on being my ex, would decide when he doesn't want to discuss anymore and would just walk out of the room and force me to have to hunt him down or follow him to continue talking. Like your wife, he stated it was to process and come back level-headed. Unlike your wife, however, he would proceed to pretend like we didn't have a conversation at all for days, sit in the room staring at Tumblr all day, pretending I don't exist, until I would finally be like, "So, are we dealing with this or not?" And then I would be met with the same thing we just had a fight about 3 days ago, except when I'm reiterating my points, now he suddenly gets it. After 3 days and a second argument, what you and your wife have is a healthy alternative to what I'm having. If anyone else can even remotely relate to anything I've just described, read what I'm responding to and know that it can be better. Communication needs to be the first thing people work on. Story 15. Opening marriage to fix problems. My ex-boyfriend did this 3 years into our extremely well-functioning, or so I thought, relationship about a year into me securing my dream job and moving to his state. I knew immediately he was cheating on me, probably the whole relationship. Suddenly his weird refusal to move in together made perfect sense. A lot of red flags that seemed minor blew up. He had trouble maintaining his good guy image afterward because I was far too likable and stable of a partner to our mutual friends and local family, so legitimizing his new relationship was trickier than he was used to. He married the train wreck to prove how serious he was, and now he's miserable and too ashamed to have a third divorce. Open marriages and relationships are extremely tricky, even with the best of intentions, but if used very suddenly to fix a relationship, it's safe to say at least one party has already unethically opened things up. They just want to use it as a cover to maintain their reputation. I'm rambling, but anyone going through this, follow your instincts and don't agree to an open relationship if you are truly monogamous, with no desire to experiment. Don't hold on to someone who doesn't want to be held on to, and never be afraid to cut losses. I only regret not ditching him sooner. A lot of time, work, and soul-searching went into it, but I've been insanely happy for the last 5 years. You can always start over. It's never too late. The mechanics of this are always the same. The husband meets someone they're attracted to, probably at work. Then they bring up how they want to try to save their marriage by opening it up. The husband then either begins or tries and fails to begin a relationship with his crush. Meanwhile, the wife doesn't initially date until she sees how much effort her husband is putting into pursuing other women and starts dating other guys. 6 months later, the husband has done one hookup, maybe, and a string of first dates that all end in disaster. Meanwhile, the wife is elbows deep in all the dick she could possibly want and realizes how much of an asshole her husband is. How long until they divorce is the only variable here. This is an experiment that rarely ever works out. Story 16. A recent personal experience I witnessed. The entire immediate family of one side of a wedding said it was a bad idea, and less than a month into the marriage, one of them stayed at their mom's house for the night because they were fighting. Also, they got engaged as a result of a failed breakup attempt. My ex-husband and his wife are like this. Not gonna lie, it is quite comical, and I rather enjoy watching the train wreck. That's what keeps me from not wanting to pull my hair out because our kid is in the middle of it. They break up, he abandons her for weeks. They are back together. He expects the exact same visitation as before. They straight up got engaged and broke up a week later. Apart for 6 weeks, then told our kid, "Oh, we are getting married in 3 days and you aren't coming to the wedding." She was absolutely devastated. She does try to find the comedy in it as well. She's taking bets on when they break up. The stories are epic and something like out of a TV show. Some of it seems made up. It's so crazy. I had a friend that did this. He kept dumping her, and the last time she just told him she had enough. The next day he came back back, begging for her and swearing that he loved her more than anything in the world, and she told him to prove it, so he proposed. She didn't know what to do, so she said yes, and it went downhill from there. Don't paint a burning house. There's no point. You'll just throw money down the drain in the process. Story 17. If all disagreements end in arguments. My partner and I disagree about a lot of stuff, but we can talk, discuss, and even sometimes agree with the other person's side. It'd be weird if you saw eye to eye on 100% of stuff, too. I was told by someone a strong relationship has fights. This person and his wife are constantly fighting over things. Since we met years ago, I could count the number of fights my girlfriend and I have had on one hand. And even then, neither of us has ever raised our voice at the other. Not once have we ever said anything mean to each other intentionally. It's not that hard to discuss things like an adult. Feeling safe enough with someone to confront them, share feelings, and be vulnerable is a very healthy and happy feeling. It doesn't lead to fighting, it leads to partners being actual partners. Obviously, we don't agree on everything. On some things, we have almost no points of agreement on. But we love each other and want what's best for them and want them to fulfill their dreams, so it never gets to a point of contentious fight, but rather a vulnerable discussion. Yep, an argument doesn't have to escalate to a fight. You have to respect your partner's right to have an opinion, even if it differs from yours. You don't have to agree or even like the opinion, but the mere fact of them having it should not be a source of contention. Well, okay, I'll admit that it depends on the opinion in question, but let's leave politics and religion out of it. Understanding and respect are key. Each partner should be free to voice their opinion without fear of it devolving into a shouting match, but it's also important to voice said opinion in a way that doesn't invite the same. I'm not suggesting walking on eggshells. I'm saying that an accusatory or angry tone isn't likely to produce the desired reaction. Humans have a knee-jerk reaction to such comments. I've personally worked hard to listen to the words and ignore the tone to suppress my innate desire to get defensive. It's definitely not easy, but it's worth it assuming that the other person is willing to do the same. Positive criticism is likely to produce better results than negative. The bottom line, in an argument, you're trying to come to an understanding. In a fight, you're trying to win at any cost. Sometimes that cost can be too high. If you have to fight battles every single time you have a disagreement, things are bound to get really tiring really fast. Story 18. Having a kid to fix their relationship. I feel this too much. My parents definitely were toxic together and caused so much stress, yelling, trauma, and even abuse in our home. I used to pray to God that they would make something happen to my mom so my dad would leave her. My dad was very religious and used to proudly boast that he'd never get a divorce. I vowed in front of God, till death do us part. So yeah, I wished death for my mom as a kid. I had an awful childhood between poverty and parents that I'm not truly sure ever loved each other, and pretty much every couple up the line on both sides of my family ended in divorce. Or if I'm being quite honest, the women are putting up with far more than they should, and far less than their, and I guess their would fit too, worth. It may have taken a suicide attempt on my father's part, but I thank God my parents split up. I created a fake character, Mr. Meatball, not the actual name, my pointer finger, to say the things for me I felt I couldn't. I don't wish the hell I went through on anyone. For the kids is a whole ass lie. If you, a grown adult, can't fix your problems, how can a baby do it? Story 19. When they post each other too much. I get the occasional pic together, but when you full-on document every little thing, it just comes across as wanting to prove your relationship to other people because you're insecure. I have a friend who just got out of a horrible marriage and a year later is posting almost daily about how much in love she is with her new man and how perfect he is and how she has never felt love like this before. Pictures of them all the time, every single day. I'm just waiting for the end. Hopefully not, but she has kids from 2 different people already, so I'm sure at some point she felt the same way about her baby daddies. It's a slow motion train wreck. Might take a while though. Who knows, maybe a 3rd time is the charm. Spend more time working on your relationship than trying to get the perfect post of the day. Thanks for watching until the end. If you have a similar story that you would like to share with us, please leave it in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, please leave us a like and make sure to subscribe. For more videos like this one, right now, please stay tuned or please check out our channel. Thanks again and see you next time.